recording is what we use, officially, rather than taking meeting minutes. We can just post the recording to our website, which we have done in the past couple of meetings, and that's worked fairly well. And it complies with our open meeting laws. So, all right. Well, Mr. Chairman, I'll kind of let you take it from here and decide if you want to proceed or wait for anybody else to join on. But that's
well, I'd like to see if is there anybody else out there that needs to be joining in, or do we have some other people that we're going to call in? Do you know of, or some private people that are interested?
Let's see here. I know Michael Mathers had accepted the invitation, so I'm not sure if he will join on. I didn't hear back from Hadley Connor.
I only have 4 people listed.
Yeah, well, there's a couple of other folks that registered, and I'm just going to go and look at the list here really quick. Because on the invite, I send it out to the council members and any staff in agriculture that may be joining, and then everybody else, just basically for the security of the meeting, to ensure that we're getting people in there that have good intentions of participating in the meeting. We do the registration, and anybody from the public is welcome to join in, but typically there isn't a ton of interest, which is a little bit unfortunate, but it is what it is. So let's see here. As far as attendees, I only had 3 other guest attendees that had received the registration or had registered with us, and so they may join on later on, but I guess when you're ready, Brent, we can get started.
Well, let's. I'd like to call the meeting to order. It's on my phone, on my computer. It's 10:03. I'd like to call this meeting to order.
All right.
And are you going to? Do I take the roll call, or?
I can proceed with the roll call, Mr. Chairman. And so we'll go through and see which of our council members are present this morning.
Okay, let's do that.
Just getting back here really quick. I have so many windows open on my computer. It's try to have my notes ready. So yeah, this is for our meeting December 8th, 2021. Looks like Mark just dropped off, but I know he was here. So I will go down the list of our council members, starting with our chairman, Brent Erickson.
Okay. Here.
All right. Yeah, for the council members, just respond here, present. Next is our vice chairperson, Lynn Hamilton. And Lynn, are you able just to respond here or present? I see that you're on the screen.
Oh, I apologize. I muted out of consideration here. Yes, I am.
All right. And then Mark Ellery was just here, but he dropped off the screen. So we'll see if he comes back on. Hadley Connor, doesn't appear that she is present. Let's see, Michael Mathers.
Excuse me, I just I got bumped off on the server, and I'm back on.
All right, so Mark Ellery, you are present, correct?
I am present now.
Okay, awesome. And then we didn't hear anything from Michael Mathers or Hadley Connor. I don't see them on the video here. But Mr. Chairman, we do have a quorum of council members for our meeting, so we are able to proceed.
Okay, I'd like to proceed with the meeting. And so who is up on the agenda? I just have my phone, so I can't see anything.
Yeah, so the next item on the agenda is just approval of the June 17th, 2021 meeting minutes, which is a video recording. So the council will just need to vote on that.
I'd like to ask the council to vote on accepting the minutes from June 2021. That was a voice recording. Do I have someone to nominate that?
Yeah, I'll move, Mr. Chairman. I'll move. This is Mark to approve the meeting's agenda of June 17th. Is there a second?
Do we have a second?
Yes, Lynn will second that motion.
Okay, thank you for your second. The minutes for June 2021, the voice recording is approved.
Mr. Chairman, I believe we do need to take the official vote, and if you'd like,
Yes.
I can just do a roll call vote really quick of the council members present.
Okay, let's do that. Yes,
Okay,
sir.
so I'll start with Brent Erickson. That'll be a yay or nay.
I approve.
Okay, or
Oh,
approve.
yay.
Okay.
Yay.
Are we still on?
Yep, Mark Ellery. Mark Ellery, I just need a yay or nay vote for the approval of the meeting minutes.
Yay. Yay. I apologize. I don't know if my phone was just going in and out or not, but
Okay. And then Lynn Hamilton.
Yay.
All right, Mr. Chairman, we have 3 yay votes, 0 nay votes. Again, we do have a quorum. 2 council members are not present. So it looks like the meeting minutes are approved.
Okay, thank you. The minutes are approved for 2021, June of 2021.
Okay, and so we can proceed then. The next item on the agenda was a message from our director, Killian, who wasn't able to attend the meeting. He initially accepted, and then unfortunately he had another meeting to attend to. I do have some updates about things going on in the Department of Agriculture that I will provide later on in the meeting. So we can just proceed then to item number 5 on the agenda, which is the risk-based inspection approach analysis. And so this is a continuation of our discussion from our June 17th, 2021 meeting. And at that time, if you all remember, I'm getting here to share my screen. What we did in the advisory council is we actually went through and prioritized risk factors as part of the initial steps for what's called a Kepner-Trigo analysis or a KTA analysis. And that was something that I had worked on with, at the time, our representative from the Governor's Transformation Office, who had suggested I try to go through this Kepner-Trigo analysis method to do a risk-based inspection approach. And so here we are. You should all be able, if you're at your computers, you should be able to see what I am presenting here. And I'm seeing like a black bar flashing in the top of the screen. Does anybody see that?
our server's
Or is
down,
it just...
so I can't access it.
Oh, okay.
I do see it.
Okay, I don't know what that's all about. I'm gonna try and... That's interesting. All right, that looks better.
Did you have a copy of that agenda that you could post or send out?
The agenda is posted on our website. I believe it's also attached to the meeting invite. And
okay, I didn't.
Oh, it's not
I
attached
can't
to the
see
meeting.
it. No.
Yeah, if you go to the, I can kind of show, well, I can't show you, you're on the phone. I can direct you there on our website if you go to agriculture.az.gov.
I'm in the water.
Yeah. Well, I'll just let it go. We'll just have to do it.
And I'll do my best to explain. You know, this
Thank
is
you.
this is a very visual kind of exercise here as far as what we were working through. So, you know, ideally it would be best to view what I'm presenting, but even after the meeting, you know, I'll talk about the process, where we're at right now with it. And after the meeting, you're welcome to look at the recording and see what I'm presenting. I don't want to share this with, well, I guess I could share it as a viewing option with the council members at this point. After the meeting, you know, it's still under development. And so I want to make sure that the data that we have and we've worked on so far is preserved. So
that's okay. I just wanted to stay a little bit more active with the meeting, and I'll figure out how to if we keep doing these remote meetings, and I'll figure out how to get on with you guys, and because I've never done that before, so
okay.
that's my
And Kevin,
problem.
this is Mark. I would love to see that after the fact, because right now I'm dead in the water. I'm happy I'm just on a phone call.
Yeah, what I'll do is I'll share it here with everybody just really quick. And that way, let's see, Hillary. And I'll just give you viewing privileges at this time, but what you can do is I believe you can comment on different things that you see, and we can discuss it, you know, obviously at our next meeting if there is anything of interest there. Here,
Okay.
let's see. Okay. So the way that the Kepner-Trigo analysis works, so you all should get an email with access to this document. Again, it's a view-only privileges at this point. So the way that this works, if you recall, we had a list of risk factors. And some of those risk factors, which if you're looking at the screen here, are highlighted in red. Those were ones that we came up with in the council members came up with for the advisory council at our previous meeting, which I believe was March of 2021. And actually, yeah, March of 2021. And then the ones listed in black here were additional risk factors that our weights and measures staff came up with after viewing, you know, what the advisory council had done. And so last time at our meeting, we basically just looked at this page and we said, okay, we have all of these risk factors here. We need to prioritize them. What's the most important? What's the least important in the eyes of the advisory council? And we're going to give them a priority score, which will be used in the analysis further down the road. And so the advisory council, that's what we did at our last meeting, and we had good discussion on the different risk factors. If you remember, we even went through and assigned a new priority score, a AA priority for repeat violations, location, and category, because there was discussion that risk factor was more important than probably some of the other ones that were out there. And so the cool thing about a KTA analysis is that you can take the perspective of the advisory council, you know, industry representatives, and combine that perspective with any other groups out there that you survey and say, hey, you know, what are the priorities here for these different risk factors? So you could go to the public, you could go to people within agriculture, within weights and measures, and so on, and gather all that together. And what it gives you at the end is a combination saying, well, this group feels that this is the highest priority. This group feels that these are the highest priority. And when we combine those scores together, it's telling us to do this. And so I'm going to demonstrate to you how we've progressed and kind of where we've gotten, because currently we've gotten to a point with the analysis here where it's pointing to specific inspection types, and it's saying, hey, these are the ones based off of the risk factor priority, the relevance of those risk factors to that inspection type, that maybe you should focus on. And so what we did is in August, we had an in-person staff meeting with our weights and measures staff. And we went through and I split them up into 3 groups because, I wanted them to think, okay, from the perspective of a regulator, but also from the perspective of a consumer, what are the priorities that you would give to these different risk factors. And so we had an A, B, and C group, and we went through and they did the same exercise. And what surprised me about it was that within weights and measures, the 3 groups that we had, they're all people that go out and do inspections and, we're a regulating agency. Our staff members, these 3 groups had surprisingly different answers and perspectives. And it just goes to show that, everybody might have a different feeling about one risk factor over the other, but you can take that into account and still continue with this exercise and get a result that you can look at and go, okay, do we want to act upon this? So going through I'll go to the comparison. So we went through the same exercise with our groups. There was a group A, group B, group C. And so I went through and let's see, group C, risk factors, risk factor comparison here. And so those letter values, those priority scores that were assigned to the risk factors were converted into a number. So if you had a double A, that was converted into a 15. If you had an A, it was converted into a 10, B 5, and C 1. And what that becomes, as I'll show you here in a minute, is a multiplier for the different risk factors. And it'll take that multiplier and multiply it by a relevance score for the different inspection types. And that's how you calculate, okay, this is, the inspection category with the highest score overall. So that's the one that through this data analysis is the riskiest, and maybe you should focus on that. So here you can see advisory council being in column B here, and then our 3 weights and measures, A, B, and C, that there were a lot of commonalities as far as giving high scores to certain risk factors. Category valid complaint history, which is in this particular inspection category, do you have a lot of valid complaints? Environmental impact was a big one. That relates specifically to our gasoline vapor recovery, our cleaner burning gasoline programs. Repeat violations. Do you have locations, or in this case, categories, where there's a history of repeat violations? There's a continued non-compliance, and that was a high score. And so you can see here, it continues down. Financial impact was a high one. Safety impact was a high one. Category compliance rate, so the overall compliance of an inspection category, was a high one as well. And then it continues on to some that are very low, such as the complexity of the inspection and the sensitivity of devices. And I'll talk about some of these risk factors because after evaluating this, we actually, in the final analysis, eliminated some of the risk factors, and there's reasons behind that after looking at the data. And we can have discussion afterwards as to whether the council agrees with kind of how that moves, because nothing that we have here is set in stone at this point. We're presenting it obviously for discussion. So this is just a little bit of analysis here, but I'll show you how these risk factor scores were then placed into the different inspection categories. And so the next step that we did as a management team here in Weights and Measures is we scored the different inspection categories based off of their relevance to that risk factor. And we tried to use as much data from our database to do this as possible, because we would rather, it's supposed to be a data-driven, risk-based inspection approach. We want to leave as much bias and opinion out of this as we can. And so we want to use the data to tell us, like, hey, this is where you should focus. And so we started with all of our risk factors, and we narrowed it down to the 9 that you see here. And I'll again explain in a little while why we narrowed it down to these 9. But for instance, category compliance rate being this first one here, we created a criteria where if your compliance rate is 100%, you have no violations in a category, then your score is a 1. And what that's going to do is take whatever the score was in the category compliance rate from the different groups. So your priority score for advisory council was, let's see, that was category compliance rate. So you scored it as an A. So it's going to take that 1 and multiply it by 10. And it's going to add that in total to a final score for that inspection category. But if you had a compliance rate of 95 to 99%, then we gave it a 2. So it's going to boost that score up a little bit because, well, the compliance rate is a little bit lower, so you should probably focus on that a little bit more. And then it goes on to 90 and 94% is a 3, 70 to 89% is a 4, and anything with a compliance rate that's lower than 70% is a 5. And so you can see as we go through here, the different inspection categories, a lot of them are at the 3 level. They're a 90 to 94% compliance rate overall. Large capacity scales has a little bit lower compliance rate, so it scored a 4. Retail price accuracy is one that has a lower compliance rate, so that one scored as a 4. Water vending machines, which we've separated into its own category because they're kind of their own animal as far as the type of device and what they're doing. That one has a very low compliance rate, so that one scored a 5. Other liquid measuring device equipment, so this is things like aviation fuel dispensers, motor fuel dispensers, any type of metering device that has a liquid that's basically not a motor fuel for on-road vehicles becomes a liquid measuring device. That one had a very high or a very low compliance rate, I should say. And same with propane meters, that was one as well. So you can see that based off of that criteria, we can give scores to each of these different inspection categories and say, hey, for water vending machines, the category compliance rate risk factor is more relevant than it is for motor fuel dispensers because water vending machines has a lower compliance rate. So I hope that makes sense at this point before we continue on. Does anybody have any questions so far?
No, it's making sense to me. This is Mark.
Okay.
Other than now, and this probably isn't a question for right now, but the historical, you've got to go back in time a certain amount, or is this going to be like a clean slate type of deal? You have to start with a clean slate, or do you plan to get a baseline with this? Are you going to go back 3 years or whatever it may be to track those compliance rates?
Yeah, so these compliance rates were based off of a 5 fiscal year, compiled from 5 fiscal years, the previous 5 fiscal years.
Okay,
so we went back that far. Yeah, if we started with a clean slate, and that's one thing that you can do, because over time, devices change, the marketplace changes, the way that, even technical requirements for devices change. And so maybe that affects the compliance rate. And one thing about this that I've learned is you can use this as an ongoing tool, right? You can look at this from year to year or month to month or whatever you wanted to do and update the data in here. As compliance rates rise in one category and fall in another category, it might tell you, okay, now you need to focus on this inspection type or that inspection type. And so this is something that could be used as an ongoing tool. It's not just a one-time thing. So as we go down, any other questions?
No, I was just going to make a comment. I like this data because this is Brent, and it seems relevant that when you start to look at it, that it makes some sense, especially given the numbers, and then the historical data up to this point is where we're at. But going forward, those numbers can definitely move quite a bit.
Yeah, especially if you do focus on one area because the analysis is telling you to focus on that area, and then you start improving compliance because you're conducting more inspections, you're providing more education. okay, compliance rate goes up there. Well, great. Maybe we don't need to focus on that area as much anymore. And let's redo the numbers and see, okay, what is our compliance rate now in this category? As we go on to the next one, category of valid complaint history. So within that inspection category, how many valid complaints, or what percentage of the complaints were valid, basically? Because, a consumer can complain about anything. And what we find a lot of times is that the complaints that we get, we'll go out and investigate them, and then whatever the consumer was claiming, it's not there for one reason or another. Either the location already fixed it, or there really wasn't a problem that existed initially, and the complaint was more kind of a retaliatory measure, and the consumer just didn't get their way at the store. We do find that a lot, and so we think it's important that this is one reason that we eliminated just the risk factor that was, well, how many complaints does the category have total? Because again, you can have a significant number of complaints come in, but what really matters, or at least to us, is, well, how many of those complaints are valid? Where are we actually finding non-compliance? If we have complaint after complaint after complaint, and we identify that there's no compliance issue here, then to us, that's not a big deal. But if we have complaint after complaint after complaint, and each one is coming up valid, there is a compliance issue here, and we need to focus more attention on that. And so that's why, we have category valid complaint history. And again, we scored them based off of what percentage of complaints were valid. And you'll see that the higher categories really relate to our retail pricing. We do have a lot of valid complaints there, more so than motor fuel dispensers. Water vending machines is another one that is up there again. And so anyway, you can see as we go through how this works for each of the risk factors. Some of them, like the next one, financial impact, we base that as much off of data, consumer data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So how much is a consumer spending on average in this or that or the other? And we're putting that as kind of the financial impact. What's the average price of gasoline? Obviously, that's gone up, significantly in the past year. But at the time we did this, $3.32 a gallon versus the average price of, maybe a grocery price per unit, for instance, like something that's sold by weight. Well, that's $6.73 per unit versus, a gallon of gasoline. And so that's kind of how we based our data analysis on that. And so, like I said, we tried to involve as much data as we could here. I am hearing a little bit of echo, and so I guess for those who aren't speaking, or guess the one left there, but for those who aren't speaking, if you wouldn't mind muting, and then when you want to say something, go ahead and unmute and talk. But that's just the nature of virtual meetings, I'm afraid. So as we continue on, financial impact was one that we kept around because it scored highly from all of the groups that we evaluated for the priority score. Environmental impact was another high score. Again, that relates mostly to motor fuel quality, gasoline vapor recovery, anything relating to the motor fuels, the vapors associated with them. And so you'll see when you get to small capacity scales, large capacity scales, pricing, those ones scored 1 because there's really no environmental impact there. In terms of air quality is what we're looking at. Whereas motor fuel, that was a 5. Gasoline vapor recovery, that was a 5. Those programs are there mainly for air quality attainment is why they're there. So, and then safety, limited consumer areas. This is one that was, rural areas of the state, areas where consumers don't have as many options to choose from as far as, if I want to purchase groceries, well, there's only one grocery store in my town. So I'm pretty much stuck shopping there. Is it important to focus, on those locations more because there might be a greater opportunity of a consumer being taken advantage of because they're stuck with paying whatever price the grocery store has there. That one we felt was generally equal across the board as far as all the different types of devices and inspections that we do, because there's pretty much an equal risk we felt, or equal relevance to those inspection programs in the limited consumer areas. Um, Repeat violations was one that was kept around, because again, that one scored very high. And if there are repeat violations, then that shows us, hey, there's non-compliance in this particular category. Um, Potential for fraud. So what type of devices, uh, or the design of the devices, or the nature of the transaction, is there a greater potential for fraud in that transaction versus another one? So, like, motor fuel quality, we scored that low because motor fuel goes through a lot of analysis to get to the consumer, right? There are a lot of points of kind of quality assurance there, whereas you have a device like a small capacity scale. Well, there are some older devices out there that don't have the calibration security seal. It wasn't required at the time. They don't have the audit trails, the password protection that they do now for people to possibly change the calibration parameters of the device, or even just manipulating the device from a physical perspective. You don't have to do anything to the technical side of it, just the way the device is designed or the way that the transaction occurs. And so that was another one that was kept around, again, because of the score. And then the frequency of inspection for the specific category. How often are we inspecting this? Because if we have a low frequency of inspection, then frequency of inspection is more relevant to that inspection category than others, because, well, we're not looking at those devices as much. And so inherently, there's greater risk associated with that because there's less oversight from our agency, I guess, as far as ensuring compliance. And so that was the theory behind that. Um, I'm going to look at my notes here really quick and make sure that I see that Brent dropped off. See back there, Brent's back. I just want to make sure that I have explained anything else related to some of the risk factors that we eliminated to do this analysis right here. And if anybody has any discussion about them, we can talk. But anything related to location, so location compliance rate, location complaint history, location valid complaint history, and repeat violations for location, we eliminated those risk factors because typically, and you'll see as we go later in this meeting, we're implementing a little bit of a new inspection program to address this as well. But if we have locations that are non-compliant, we're already focusing additional resources on them if they have continued non-compliance. So an example is our pricing inspections. If the location continues to fail a pricing inspection, we're going back and doing a re-inspection until they pass. If a device is found to be non-compliant, then we're placing a tag on it and making sure a registered service representative goes out and ensures that the device is compliant. Gasoline vapor recovery, if there's a compliance issue, we're basically shutting that vapor recovery system down until the repairs are made and it's tested and compliant. So we're already taking actions that can be seen as risk-based on the individual locations when we're finding non-compliance. So in some cases, re-inspections are conducted. In other cases, we even reach out to the corporate level to resolve repeated non-compliance issues, because sometimes at the store level, they don't maybe have enough power within their company to make the changes that are needed. Maybe it's something that happens at the corporate level. In fact, I'm doing that with one company, large retailer. Next week, we're going through and talking about pricing. And so that's an educational opportunity where we're going out and walking them through our inspection and saying, these are what are and are not violations, and this is how you can prevent this from happening. Rather than going and doing inspection after re-inspection after re-inspection, taking our resources that are limited and the location's resources that are limited, and going through that exercise when there's no improvement in compliance. So that's an example of why those risk factors were eliminated. Does that make sense? Does anybody have any questions?
Nope, sounds good.
Okay, so the next ones were impact to businesses, and I'll go back here to show you what we're talking about. Impact to businesses and complexity of inspection. So after talking about these, we felt that if there is a high risk identified in an inspection category, whether or not that inspection is complex, and really whether or not that inspection has a significant impact to businesses, it shouldn't matter, because what we're doing is we're trying to ensure equity in the marketplace. We're trying to ensure compliance not only for the consumer but for the business as well, so that either party is not losing money, that there's a fair transaction occurring. And so if it takes us, you know, 4 hours to do a packaging inspection and properly test the package and determine, that, hey, these packages contain the labeled quantity or they don't, because our risk analysis is telling us to do that, because there's apparently a high risk with that category, then we felt that, well, it's something that needs to be done. And that was something that we had discussed, you know, a- a- when we went through the prioritization. And so complexity of inspection was one that the advisory council scored very low. Impact to businesses was one that, scored higher, that it was a priority for the advisory council to uh, ensure that, hey, this is an important risk factor if there's a big impact to businesses. So I'm curious if anybody has any thoughts on those two.
I agree with you completely. I think just listening to the thought that has gone into this, I'm truly impressed by what you guys have put together so far.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it was a significant amount of work, but it was also a fun exercise with our team, because it really got people to think about the inspections that they're doing. Why are they doing them? Look at it from the perspective of a consumer. Look at the perspective of a business. I mean, we have people within Weights and Measures who had careers in the grocery stores. You know, we have one person who used to be a vapor recovery RSR, so they understand it from an industry perspective. And so that was taken into account, when we went through this. Sensitivity of devices was a risk factor that was eliminated, because whether or not a device is more or less sensitive, um, it didn't really matter to any of our groups. It received a low priority score, and it was like, okay, this is not important to the people that we surveyed, so let's just eliminate it from consideration, because it's not going to impact the end result at all. So that's an example of some of the risk factors and why they were eliminated. It wasn't just because, no, we don't like these. It's because, well, there's data behind this, or there's reasoning behind this to say, hey, these risk factors, you know, really aren't that important. These are the ones that we should focus on, as far as, what's going to tell us, hey, these are the inspection types that you need to focus on. So I'll show you then how the scores are calculated. So here's our risk factors. This is the advisory council. So the 9 risk factors that we carried through the process. Um, Here's the multiplier. So when you enter on your sheet here, if you enter A for this sheet is converting that A into a 10. I actually have a formula written up here. And so it's just taking those scores in. And then what you're doing is going through each inspection category. It's plopping in the relevance scores that we talked about earlier for each risk factor. And then it's taking the relevance score, multiplying it by the weighted multiplier for that risk factor, summing all of those up together within that one inspection category, and giving you a number at the bottom. And so, for instance, based off of these 9 um, risk factors that were carried through, and for the advisory council, these scores that, for the priority scores for the risk factors, basically this would be telling us that the advisory council, the data that you've given, um, or priority scores, I should say, that you've given to the risk factors, and the data that we've pulled from our compliance database, says that, well, motor fuel dispensers, motor fuel quality, those are inspection categories that have a high score priority. Um, RSA, RSR inspections, LPG meters, water vending machines, and so on. So that's just for one group. But what we did is we combined these scores together to get the perspective of both weights and measures, advisory council. Like I said, if you wanted to add additional groups in there and just survey random people from the public, and say, hey, this is what weights and measures does. What do you think about these risk factors related to their inspections? How would you prioritize them? You could throw that in here as well, and it may change things a little bit or it may not. So I'll go to the combined score page here. And this is where we pulled everything together. And what we did is averaged the 3 weights and measures groups. And then we combined those scores together between the advisory council and weights and measures. And we also averaged them just to see, where we were at. And what I found was interesting here is that between the advisory council and the average between our 3 weights and measures groups, we were only off as far as our perspective on prioritization of risk factors by a few points in each. I mean, look at small capacity scales. The advisory council score was 235. Weights and measures was 233.25. So the scores were really close going down here, which shows me that the way things were prioritized, we kind of have the same idea between the advisory council and weights and measures on this is where the resources should be focused. And so anything highlighted in red here, there's a color scale. Anything that's red, higher risk. Anything that's closer to green, lower risk. And so you can see as we go down, motor fuel dispensers, motor fuel quality, those scored highly, partially because of environmental impact was one reason for motor fuel quality, but also, financial impact. I believe repeat violations was a higher score. It wasn't one of the highest that we had, but so those were some of the factors that got these inspection types up a little higher. Retail price accuracy, that one had a lot to do with valid complaints, compliance history. So that one's a higher score. As we go down here, LPG, again, low compliance rate in that category. Gasoline vapor recovery, RSA, RSR, those ones as well. And then some of the ones that didn't have high priority scores, public weighmaster, counting devices, linear measuring, which we don't do a lot of anyway. So part of that is there's not a ton of compliance data there. CNG had lower. We've done several of those inspections, and those devices seem to be pretty good at staying in tolerance. We're actually going to be involved in a study with CNG meters, which I will talk about a little bit later on. Small capacity scales have a little bit higher compliance rate. Large capacity scales, this was a surprising one because they have a relatively low compliance rate and inspection frequency, but with the other risk factors that were considered, it wasn't seen as much of a priority. So that's kind of the end result here. And this is where the worksheet tells you, hey, this is what you should focus on. I did throw in some other numbers here at the bottom just to add additional information is, well, how many locations do we have? How many devices do we have in this category? How many devices do we have per investigator? Just to show you the kind of workload that's out there for us in these different inspection categories. How many inspections do we do on average, to give you an idea? What's the inspection frequency? I mean, you can see large capacity scales, our inspection frequency is once every 24 years. Packaging, for all of the locations where there are packages to be tested that we have in our database, once every 31 years. Other liquid measuring devices, that one has a really terrible inspection frequency, in my opinion. LPG meters, once every 43 years. And this one's skewed a little bit because we do a lot of the bottle docks, the bottle filling stations that you'd find like at a gas station or a grocery store. But we don't do as much of the bobtails, the delivery trucks. They have meters on them as well. And so we're developing an inspection program to address that as well, especially since we're getting a new a second LPG test vehicle to go out there and do those meters. So that's where we're at right now. So I'm curious to hear any thoughts on what you see kind of as the end result of this analysis so far.
Can I ask one question? You said
Yes.
the weights and measures groups that you did, the 3 groups, were those separated by one of them was inspectors, one of them was, or was it just a random grouping of everybody in every position within weights and measures?
It was a random grouping. They just all got together in their own little groups, and it was a combination of management team and investigators. It wasn't all investigators in one group, all management in the other group, and that actually created some interesting discussion, because what the investigators see in the field versus what we see in the office, sometimes there's different perspectives on that, and so I think that's one reason why the scores, you can see here, like motor fuel dispensers, 360 for weights and measures group B, 255 for group A. The discussion that people had sometimes push the priority score one way or the other. But like I said, in the end, when you averaged it between the 3 groups, we were within 10 points of each other on most everything here, which I thought was really interesting. I expected the advisory council and weights and measures to kind of have some differences of opinion here and there. So I hope that answers your question.
Yep, absolutely.
This is Mark. I think it all sounds wonderful. Well done. Unfortunately, I just can't see any of it. I'm stuck here. So, but I really look forward to looking at what you're presenting right now, because it does sound fantastic. Good job.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like this will be a continued agenda item for our next meeting after people have had a chance to look at it, and maybe it'll gain some interest in having more people involved. If more people involved in the discussion from our council members and other people attending the meeting to kind of take a look and see where this is going to go. Because at this point, we haven't changed our inspection programs at all, as far as, okay, we need to focus more here on what this is saying, because to me, this is still under evaluation. This is, are we going the right direction or not? This is one way to analyze data to try and get you a result and use that data to say, hey, this is where you need to focus your resources. But is there another way that might work as well, or are there other things that need to be considered? So
just a thought, Kevin, as you said that, when this, or whatever direction this goes, a comparison of how it would work to what your current program or strategy of inspections, that'd be kind of interesting, don't you think? It may not, at the end of the day, it may not differ a whole lot from how you're currently operating. Do you think?
Yeah, the one surprise that I had, because I really thought, I was thinking a lot about compliance rates when I went into this, because I know which inspection programs out there have higher or lower compliance rates, and a lot of that has to do with the number of resources that are focused on it. And we've historically, we've gone through before in an advisory council meeting and talked about, well, why do we focus so many resources on, motor fuel related inspections, the fueling devices themselves, motor fuel quality? And part of that has to do with the funding that we receive from the Department of Environmental Quality to administer those programs, but also, historically it's been, well, think about on a weekly basis, where are the consumers going? Well, they're going to gas stations. They have to, fill up their vehicles with motor fuels. They're going to the grocery stores. They have to purchase groceries for their family. I mean, those are 2 places that consumers visit on a regular basis. How many consumers go and get a propane bottle refilled? How many consumers go to a water vending machine? Those are some things to think about as well. And so historically, I think that's somewhat how the division operated. I'm actually going through some historic documents that I found. I'm cleaning out my office, and you'll find out why later in this meeting, but I found some studies all the way back to 1996 on kind of a sampling procedure for inspections and how to focus your resources and what percentage of resources should be focused on A, B, or C. And there's some really interesting data in there that I think will need to be, I think the spirit of the study and some of the data in there is still relevant to this day. And it's stuff that we've kind of dropped off doing over time. And so I'm trying to look into the history of our what used to be a department and figure out, well, why did we change, the way we do things? Because most of the time there's a good reason for it. Either we were told to do it, by the governor's office, or we found a compliance issue in this area and we started focusing. And so I've always felt that you could argue with the inspection program we currently have, it's already risk based, in one way or another. But I think what the Auditor General wanted was that data to show, okay, well, where is that risk? And okay, we're fine with that as long as it's telling you, hey, this is where you should direct your resources. And so I think that's what the Auditor General was looking for. So yeah, a comparison of what we're doing here currently to what this is telling us. I will say that the motor fuel dispensers and motor fuel quality, we are focusing a lot of resources on that. We have since I've been with the division, and so that's very similar. There's a lot of similarities in here. Gasoline vapor recovery is another one that we have a lot of resources on, mainly because there's an annual inspection program. But propane, we aren't focusing on as much. Packaging probably could be more. And so yeah, if you want, I can try and work on that for, as something to present during the next council meeting as well.
As a side note, you're not going to find my name on anything till 1997.
Okay. Yeah, I'm looking at these reports, like I said, and going, hey, who are these people? And they're really interesting to read. The one eye opener for me was that in 1996, we had the exact same number of inspectors. And so we had 16 inspectors, 2 of which were field supervisors. That's our current structure. But think about how much Arizona has grown since then. How many more locations are out there that have commercial devices, that, are retail locations that price items for consumers? That was a big eye opener to me. It's like, okay, we're definitely doing more with less here in 2021. So anyway. All right. Well, if there are no other questions at this point in time, what I'll do is, I think for our next meeting, I recommend that this becomes an agenda item again, and perhaps the council members will have a time to really look over it. I can do some comparison on, okay, where are inspection resources currently being focused, and how does it compare to what this is telling us? And then we can kind of determine next steps at that point. I think that's maybe a good direction to go if the council agrees on that. So
I agree completely.
all right.
I do too.
Okay. Awesome. Well, that's all I have here for the inspection approach KTA at this point. I'm going to stop presenting, and the next item on the agenda, which is mine as well, is just a big update for weights and measures. And so, like I said, there's quite a bit that we're working on right now. And so I want to let the advisory council know, what's going on here. So let me just pull up my notes.
Sorry about that. This is Brent.
Okay. Connectivity issues.
I put you on Google stuff, so I'll get you off the. I'll mute my deal here.
Okay. All right, and I'm just pulling up my notes here, and we can get to my updates. So, like I said, since Director Killian's not here, I'm going to share some information that he would likely have presented related more to the Department of Agriculture and rather than weights and measures, but okay. And I am hearing some of that feedback again. Looks like it's muted now. So, all right. So the first piece of significant news is that the Arizona Department of Agriculture is moving in June. And this is something that is not uncommon amongst state agencies right now. The governor's office, Department of Administration are working to consolidate state agencies within specific buildings. They're looking to eliminate some of our buildings that we have. And so they've established a natural resources building, which if any of you are familiar with where the Department of Environmental Quality's offices have been for many years at 1110 West Washington Street. It's a newer building. It was built in 2001, I think. 6-story building with a parking garage on the east side. It's a fantastic office building, and that is where Weights and Measures and the Department of Agriculture will be moving next June. So we will be vacating our current home, 1688 West Adams. I understand that building's going to be used for other purposes. Don't quite know exactly what yet, but to give you an idea on how this has been working in state government, the building that's connected to our current building used to house the Department of Juvenile Corrections. Well, that building's been vacant for several months now because Juvenile Corrections had been moved to the building where the Department of Administration used to be by themselves at 15th Street in Adams. So agencies are being moved around, and mainly this is because a lot of people are working remotely. And so there's not as much of a need for office space out there. And so it makes sense to consolidate because there's fewer buildings to maintain. There's a less of a footprint to worry about in that respect. And the state has opened up different opportunities, like we have a building at 1400 West Washington, which is a remote working space. Basically, there are a bunch of workstations where if I wanted to, I could go in, take my computer, connect. I would be on the state network. I could do my work. I could basically rent that space, for a period of time, do my work. If for whatever reason I couldn't work from home, there are conference rooms and meeting rooms where you can schedule meetings with your team if everybody's working remotely and you need to have something in person. So the state is really focused on promoting remote work as much as possible. And so within our new office space, Weights and Measures is going to have one office that's about 200 square feet. And that's it. We're expected to be working remotely into the foreseeable future. And so that's why our space was reduced accordingly. And so all of the different divisions in agriculture are having to make some space reductions. Obviously, there are some divisions that will have much more space than we do. But I felt like this would be a pretty easy move for Weights and Measures. And our management staff, like I said, will continue to work remotely. We felt that our customer service really hasn't declined since we have been working remotely. We haven't heard any complaints. And for our investigators, they start their day from home anyway, so they're technically working remotely. Their duty post is their house. They don't have to come into the office really for any reason, so it doesn't impact our operations and like I said, customer service. So that's a big one. In the Natural Resources Building, Department of Environmental Quality will continue to be there in a reduced office space. We're sharing a floor with Department of Water Resources, Forestry and Fire Management's in there, Department of Tourism, State Parks. There's others that I'm leaving out. Basically, all the natural resources agencies aside from Game and Fish will be in this one building together. Does anybody have any questions about that?
No. Sounds
All right.
good. Actually, it's a pretty good sized building there that DEQ lives in right now. So
It is. It's like I said, it's a fantastic. It's meant to be an office building, and nothing against the building that we're currently in. It was built in 1930. It has a lot of character, but it's not as functional as an office space. And so this new building, I think, will work well for us. So the next one is that we recently acquired a new employee in agriculture from the governor's transformation office. Her name is Heather Flowers. And she's our new assistant director of strategic initiatives and policy. And the reason that I'm pointing this out is because Heather was assigned to the Department of Agriculture from the governor's office to help us with strategic planning and being lean, more efficient, basically. And so now she's on with us full time, and she's devoting her time specifically to our department. I had been fortunate to work with Heather on a project for the budget office where we had to gather inspection data from all of our divisions and, report as part of a resource request that we did. And she's really smart, and I think this is a great move for agriculture because she's going to help us with our strategic planning going forward. And I think we'll have a better focus on what we need to work on, how we can become more efficient. So again, her name is Heather Flowers, and she just started officially with us, I think, last week. Director Killian is continuing to focus on pay increases for our staff. This is, looks like we did have somebody from external join, or we were going to. Pay increases for staff. This is a top priority for Director Killian. And we're just waiting to hear back from the governor's office on our requests. Some studies were done at the Department of Administration comparing agriculture employees' pay to other state agencies as well as, external companies, what's in the marketplace basically. And so there were some interesting findings from that study that we passed on to the governor's office. But like I said, Director Killian's focusing on that for us. Our employees really haven't had a pay increase in many years. I think it's been over 10 years, never any cost of living increase or that type of thing. That was one of the findings in the ADOA study. So there is a need out there to increase pay. Some of the divisions in agriculture have a problem with retention or recruitment, and that's one of the reasons why. Weights and measures, we've been fortunate to not have as much of an issue, and I think one reason is that people just enjoy their job. They're passionate about what they do, and weights and measures is a great place to be. So going on to, Mark's back in person. I can see you now. All right. Okay, so now weights and measures updates. Again, there's quite a bit to go through here, but we are fully staffed now. We recently just had 2 new investigators start last week. His name is Daniel. He's in our Flagstaff and Northern Arizona district. And then the other one's Neil from Tucson in Southern Arizona. And Neil actually transferred from the Department of Environmental Quality. He used to work with their vehicle emissions programs. And so now he's in weights and measures. So all of our investigator positions are filled, which is awesome. And so now it's on to training, which takes a matter of time to get everybody up to speed on our inspection programs. But we're glad to have them aboard and hope that we don't have to do more recruitment for a while, because I'm sure, maybe in your individual organizations, you've seen it as well. It's much more challenging to recruit people right now. There's a lot of jobs that are open out there, and people are looking for the right fit for them. And obviously pay is one of the things that we have a challenge with at the state, as far as being competitive with private industry, but it is what it is, and we're happy to have Daniel and Neil aboard. We are looking to add a second compliance manager position. Currently we only have one, and that person oversees fuel quality, CBG, vapor recovery, and marijuana packaging. That's really the scope of those inspections, and there's a lot of work that has to be done in those areas. So the additional position that we're looking to add would oversee commercial device inspections, pricing inspections, non-marijuana packaging, and then the RSA and RSR programs and inspections related to that. And what it would do is allow our compliance officers, which currently are really sharing that responsibility. Compliance officers are our field supervisors, to focus more on staff training, staff supervision, and inspection consistency, which is really what's in their job description. But because our resources are stretched thin, we're having people do multiple jobs just to get things done, and it creates a challenge. And so we had this position in our division organizational chart. It's been vacant because we really haven't had the funding for it for a long time. And so I sat down with our budget person, and I think we can afford this position. And I think it would be a significant help to our division to, work with industry on our compliance programs and have a better relationship, have a better oversight of what our staff are doing out there. So again, funding for the position, we're planning on having that come out of our annual budget. Any questions so far? All righty. The next is kind of some updates on our equipment here. The big one is we're looking to purchase a new scale truck. Historically, we've had 2 scale trucks for the past several years. One that really is dedicated to testing vehicle scales, and the other one did everything else, industrial scales, livestock scales, the smaller platform scales. I say smaller, but they're like 5,000 pound capacity platform scales. And so it's a 1994 Ford truck. It has a crane on the back and a bunch of 500-pound weights and some 50-pound weights, and it's designed to lower the weights onto the scale, and we can test it accordingly. That truck's no longer in service. We still have it, but over the past year, it's broken down countless times, and most recently, the crane stopped working. And just due to its age, it's become an unreliable vehicle, and we're just not going to invest any more resources into it. So there's an opportunity of some funding through the governor's office to get a new truck. And so I'm trying to get this new truck that's based off of a vehicle I was able to see in Colorado at their weights and measures office, where it has a knuckle boom, a weight cart, large mass weights, and it's used to test everything from platform scales all the way up to vehicle scales. And so it'll be a versatile vehicle. We now have 4 people within our division that have commercial driver's licenses. So 4 people to drive these trucks and go out and do inspections. So it seems like good timing to get this other truck on board. And so that's what we're looking at. We're waiting on quotes from the Department of Transportation. They are now our fleet management. So they're trying to get us some quotes to see exactly how much this truck is going to cost. But I will tell you, just the test weights alone that we'll need to get, which are 1,000 pound test weights, each of those costs about $2,700 a piece, and we're going to need 16 to 18 of them. So that'll be a substantial cost in addition to the truck and the other equipment itself. So we're hoping that the funding comes through. We have a new above ground storage tank trailer that's being tested out in the field. And it basically has a Seraphim calibration unit on it, so the tanks and the provers. But it also has a pump and a generator to run the pump so that we can pump fuel back into above ground storage tanks. This has always been a challenge with us because not every location has a pumping system at the tanks, and the configuration at each location is always a little bit different. And so there's different types of attachments that you need and so on. So this trailer was designed between our compliance manager and one of our compliance officers. And we already had the trailer. We were going to use it for an LPG testing unit. And we went another route with that. And so we were able to build this trailer actually with the help of Coke Cheese. They were the ones that were on state contract, and we were able to get that work done. And so far it's working well. We have some minor issues with leaks that need to be addressed, but other than that, we've been able to do several above ground motor fuel dispensing sites now successfully. And we're not relying on the location to provide us special assistance, to return the fuel and things like that. So it just makes us more efficient, increases our versatility, and reduces the burden on the location when we do our inspections. We also need to purchase some additional attachments to, adapters to meet the different fill ports and things like that. But it's a pretty neat little unit there, and we just tow it behind our pickup trucks and can actually pump the fuel from our pickup trucks too into the above ground storage tank, so we can hold twice as much fuel if needed. We are still awaiting delivery of our new LPG test trailer from Seraphin. That's the reason we had this trailer available for above ground storage tanks, because we were going to build our own trailer and then found out that it would be too much of a headache. So we're investing the money in having a trailer that's ready built for us with a 25 and 100 gallon LPG prover on it, so that we can do more LPG inspections, including bobtails, as part of our new program that we're developing. Our existing LPG truck, we're planning to install a new 25 gallon prover on it that we purchased several years ago. It's been sitting in our lab, and we're finally at the point where we're going to replace our antiquated 20 gallon prover from 1975 or so. And it's just, it's an old tired piece of equipment. It's hard to read the indicators on it anymore. And so we're going to replace it this next time around when it's due for certification, which is in February. So that'll make things easier for our investigators. And finally, our state metrology lab, we're purchasing a new mass comparator for their large mass weights. 50-pound weights is mainly what they certify on it. It's a workhorse. We have a lot of 50-pound weights come through the lab. And we're starting to see increased standard deviation on our current equipment, which means that it's wearing out the load cells and such. So we're spending the money. It's about $20,000 for a new mass comparator of that scale. And so we have the purchase order going through, and hopefully that new piece of equipment will be installed soon. From the regulatory perspective, biggest news is that there is interest from industry in establishing an E15 market in the cleaner burning gasoline area. Currently, E15 is allowed for sale outside of the CBG area, but where the population is located in Phoenix, that's one of the biggest opportunities for E15 sales, from what I understand. And so we've had an industry reach out to us. They've been working with the Department of Environmental Quality on modeling E15 for the CBG area, and I don't have any information on that at this point, whether there is a reduction in environmental benefits from E15. But this is likely going to lead to a rulemaking where we're going to basically take our CBG rules and make a second version of them that's contingent on approval of a state implementation plan from EPA to allow E15 in the CBG area. And we looked through our statutes. We didn't see anything in the statutes that we felt would need to be changed to allow E15. It's really just everything in rule. And of course, the rulemaking process has plenty of opportunities for public comment, where our agency can respond to those comments and address anything. And it has to go through the governor's regulatory review committee to get approved into the administrative code. So there's plenty of process there to allow people to be involved in the rulemaking. And we'll see what the modeling says. But again, anything related to CBG is contingent on EPA. And so if the modeling shows that nope, E15 won't work, then EPA is probably going to say no. And then, that contingent rule would exist, and it wouldn't do anything. And if needed, it could be removed in the future. Or if E15 is allowed, then our current CBG rules could be removed and the new ones incorporating E15 would replace them. And so there's a lot that's involved in discussion with industry about that. And like I said, the rulemaking process will go on. I see Mark has a question there. Go ahead, Mark.
Well, just a statement. I'm fairly certain that there's a couple statutory references to E10. So I think legislation would be needed at some point. So,
Okay.
just FYI.
Yeah, I'll have to double check with Michelle Wilson, because she's the one who's really going to be focusing on the E15 program. And she had talked with ADEQ, and they felt that there's no specific references, I think, to E10. It's more like a weight percent of oxygen, if I remember correctly. But I'll have to double check with her. I know she's taking a look at that. And so if needed, I'm happy to have her reach out to you and discuss that further. But yeah, definitely, we want to talk it over with industry. If there are anything out there that industry members feel is being missed when we're talking about E15, we want to make sure that we're addressing all of those, to get the regulatory requirements in place. So thank you, and I'll pass that on to Michelle. The rulemaking, we're also going to use it as an opportunity to do some clarifying and editorial changes. There's some language in our rule that we're not establishing new requirements. We're just trying to clarify things to make it easier for people to understand our rules, including our own staff. Our rules are not necessarily written reader friendly in some cases. And we're going to adopt the new most recent edition of the NIST handbooks, the 2022 edition. So anyway, that's what we're looking forward to as far as rulemaking. And so we're at the very start of that process, and we'll see where it goes. The next one is we're implementing a new inspection program in January to follow up on enforcement tags. And we've done this here and there, but this is one where every month investigators will be assigned a certain number of inspections to follow up on enforcement tags that they issued. And this is mainly our yellow warning tags and red out of service tags. And what we're looking for is, one, is that yellow warning tag, was that issue addressed? Because there's no placed in service report required for it. And the way our rule is written, if the yellow tag is not addressed within the time frame that's established on the yellow tag, then we can basically turn it into an out of service tag, and there's enforcement action that follows along. And so we're making sure that the issues we identify and we say, hey, you have to address them within this period of time, are being addressed. And then with the red tags, we're also making sure that the issues on the red tags are being addressed and that there's a placed in service report submitted that's associated with those. And so this will involve basically testing the device again, and looking for those same violations if the repairs were supposedly made, to make sure the device is fully compliant with Handbook 44 as required in our rule. And it's just, like I said, another step to ensure compliance out there. And so we're implementing that reinspection program again starting in January, and it's going to be a small sample of our tags that investigators do. And we're going to try to focus our resources, obviously on locations where multiple tags were issued, to try and just look into those locations that have a little bit more non-compliance that was identified than others. Any questions about that program?
Will there be civil penalties resulting in non-compliance?
As with any violation that we have, there's a possibility for civil penalties. So let's take a yellow tag, for instance. So if we are looking at a device and maybe the indicator has some digital segments that are burnt out, you can't read fully what the indicator says. It could be a fuel dispenser, could be a scale, whatever. We'll say, okay, you need to get this fixed within 7 days. So we're going to follow up with the location afterwards, and hopefully that device is fixed within 7 days. We go out there and find, hey, everything's working properly, nothing else needed. But if it's not repaired within 7 days, then our rule allows us to turn that into an out of service tag. And basically then it's, well, for this same violation, the device remains out of service until the issue is corrected, because we asked you to correct it and that wasn't done. And so at that time, there may be a civil penalty associated with that. And then obviously for devices that were supposedly repaired, if you're like a registered service representative, you go out, make a repair on a device, or you remove the red tag saying that, yes, it was repaired. And then we find that, well, no, it wasn't. We have the authority to direct enforcement action towards that registered service representative or agency if we find evidence of non-compliance in that respect. We're hoping that's not the case, but one of the things we're finding is that for a lot of the enforcement tags we're issuing, the out of service tags, there are not placed in service reports being submitted with them, which is a requirement in our rule. And so that's already an issue of non-compliance. And so we're trying to follow up on that and see, hey, why is this not happening? And, if it becomes a systematic issue, like I believe it already is, then we might have to do some enforcement action to get um, back into compliance. But we're going to see what we find, and we'll address each situation individually. And obviously, with any of the enforcement action that we issue, civil penalties and such, we do have a administrative hearing and informal settlement process that allows people to discuss or contest any of our enforcement actions. So that's always included in there as well. But again, that's going to start in January. We're finishing up the procedure on that right now, and we'll roll it out to our staff at our meeting this month.
Thank you.
The other thing that we're looking at is reinstating a requirement that's in our rule for registered service agencies to affix a decal or label after they perform a calibration saying that basically the device was calibrated on this date at this time. And so our investigators have a better idea on the calibration schedules that are out there, because that's happening a lot with scales, not so much with devices that have meters, propane, fueling, and so on. And that requirement was added to our rule in 2004. And so I've done some research on it. It basically says the associate director can uh, prescribe, what these decals and labels are supposed to read and where they're supposed to be located. And so this might be a good one, since I know we have some representatives that either work with registered service agencies or are registered service agencies, to talk about at our next meeting as a possible agenda item to kind of discuss this further and the necessity for this requirement. It's something, like I said, we haven't really enforced. Some parties are better at doing this than others, but for us it's important because we get to a device, we find that it's in non-compliance, and the location says, well, I just had it calibrated or whatever, and there's no evidence to prove that. And this would say, hey, this person was out here, they calibrated the device recently. It would give us the opportunity to establish that conversation and understand, well, what work was actually done here, and why wasn't this device, certified according to NIST Handbook 44 and all that. So that might be one thing if people would like to talk about at our next meeting, and like I said, discuss further, because I know that it's not a new requirement that we're implementing. It's just one that, like I said, we haven't been enforcing, and we're kind of reinstating it. It's already written into our rule. So, and then the last one is we're starting to look into development of an electric vehicle inspection program for electric vehicle supply equipment. I was fortunate to witness the testing of an electric vehicle charger in Colorado when I was at the Western Weights and Measures meeting. And it's fairly straightforward. The requirements are really established. They're kind of finalizing the tolerances for some of the equipment. And if we adopt the new handbooks, then those requirements will be in existence. And the test equipment is affordable and fairly easy to use. And it's something that, the industry is already well established out there in Arizona, and consumers are being charged off of these devices, and they meet the definition of a commercial device, just like a fuel dispenser, a propane meter, or anything else. And so it's a program that we're going to have to get to eventually, and a lot of states are working to establish it right now. California's done a significant amount of work on type approval for electric vehicle chargers, which we accept California type approval in Arizona, and as well as developing the standards and tolerances and working with the test equipment. So that's something that'll be probably a couple of years down the road at least before we implement anything. But we do see it as something that we need to pay attention to. Like I said, Western Weights and Measures, there were representatives from Tesla there explaining kind of their chargers. I've spoken with different charging providers in the past, and they're well aware that Weights and Measures is the regulatory agency really for their devices. And so it's a relationship that is currently developing within the industry. So yeah. So, and my estimation is that there are at least 2,000 electric vehicle chargers, just individual chargers, not charging stations, because the charging station could have anywhere from one charger to, a dozen chargers or more. Individual chargers within Arizona that are currently, just out there for the consumer to use, but nobody's verifying the accuracy of them. And from what California said, they're fairly accurate, but they have identified a couple of charging stations out there that did not meet the tolerances, and they had to address that. So, any questions about electric vehicle supply equipment? All right, we're almost to the end here on the home stretch. We are participating in a NIST work group to evaluate what's called a Coriolis meter. It's basically a mass flow meter for verification of LPG and CNG meters, so propane and compressed natural gas. Currently, the method for LPG that's accepted through NIST is a prover, volumetric prover, which is equipment that we have. And for CNG, it's a gravimetric test procedure. So basically, you have a pressure vessel, you take the tare weight of it, and then you dispense product into it, and you do a gravimetric conversion. You're converting the volume to mass, and that's what you're comparing against your tolerance. I will say the gravimetric procedure, that's something we perform for CNG meters. It's very, very time consuming, and it's challenging because you have to lug this big old tank around that can't spend too much time in the sun because it's wrapped in carbon fiber and all that good stuff. And so what this is evaluating is the replacement of those types of verification methods with a simple Coriolis meter, which is a small little meter with a digital display that's in a box, and you just connect your device to it and you run the product through it, and it meters out, and you compare, kind of similar to more so what we would do with a motor fuel dispenser, where you're just saying, okay, the dispenser says 5 gallons, my prover says 5 gallons, we're good to go. Well, this is the same thing with the meter and device. And so we're participating in the NIST work group along with several other states. And all it is at this point is data gathering to compare the existing test methods with this Coriolis meter. And so NIST is going to be shipping this Coriolis meter around to the different states. We get to connect it up with our systems and see how the results compare. I got to witness that out in Colorado. And it was very interesting to see the device, and the device is much less expensive than the test equipment, especially for propane. And it could be something that would expand out to the registered service agency community as well, rather than having to have LPG provers for propane. You could have a Coriolis meter at a fraction of the cost to, verify the same devices. And so it's exciting. We haven't done much other than participated in some meetings so far, but eventually the meter will get around to Arizona and we'll test it doing field inspections, and we'll see what the results say. So very interesting program. They're also using it for fuel loading rack meters in certain states, but we opted not to participate in that portion of it just because we don't really have the test equipment for those larger meters at this point. That's something that we rely on the service companies to verify. So, and then the last thing is we started discussions with the Department of Administration regarding the relocation of our state metrology lab. Currently, it's in Glendale, 43rd Avenue and Olive. It's been there since 2000. It actually moved from Scottsdale around then, mainly due to the Loop 101 construction, the Pima Freeway. The freeway was going to be too close to our lab. It was going to affect our mass comparators and balances. And so we had to move somewhere where there was less of a vibration in the soil. And so Glendale ended up being that location. But the current facility that we have there is aging. They're building it out for different purposes. In fact, the old office that we used to have in the front of the building is now a day spa. So if you need to go get a massage or manicure, pedicure, that's what the old weights and measures office is now. And we're having some impacts on our mass comparators and balances. We are noticing a little bit more vibration in that area than we used to. And we've had some challenges with just the infrastructure of the building. Again, it's an older building, and that's affected some of our operations over the past year. So the goal is to move the facility by the time our current lease expires, which is in 2025. And that would also allow us, hopefully, to expand to offer different services for metrology, such as an echelon 1 level for mass, which is the highest level for mass certification. Currently, we're only up to echelon 2, and our current facility wouldn't support, from an environmental controls perspective, an echelon 1 laboratory. And so that would open up additional revenue sources for Arizona, additional opportunities for business from our state metrology lab. And then we'd also like to have a facility where we have secured storage space for our weights and measures equipment and vehicles, our scale trucks, our 100-gallon prover trailers, our propane truck. Currently, we rely on ADOT for that for the most part. And it's worked pretty well. Our scale truck was vandalized at one point in time a few years ago. We fortunately haven't had anything stolen, but we would just like to have a central location where everything is housed. Our investigators can go get equipment. We can keep an eye on our equipment, all the time, and have it available, for staff to use. And so that's another thing we're looking at in a new space. Obviously, we can't put a lab just anywhere. It has to be away from railroads, freeways, flight paths, anything that causes a significant vibration in the soil. So a vibration study would need to be done. The new facility, if it's built into an existing building, would need to have the proper environmental controls to maintain relative humidity, temperature, and so on, barometric pressure, um, within the laboratory. And so it would be a big challenge, and we'll see if it's a possibility. But that's something we're looking into. Yes, Mark.
I would just suggest Maui. I think that would be the best place for it.
Yeah, I don't know if I don't even know if Hawaii has their own lab, because I imagine they do, but just because of the seismic activity due to the volcanoes out there, I don't know that that would really work very well. Um, there are some other states that have constructed new labs. Again, Colorado, they built a new lab recently, and their facility was just outstanding. They have all of their agriculture labs under one roof. Metrology is, one of them. And so um, I got a lot of information from that, and I have contacts over there that I can kind of rely on to give more information. But Utah is also constructing a new metrology lab, North Carolina as well. North Carolina's had one of the higher certified labs in the past. And it's just time. We've had some frustrations, like I said, with our facility. We can't expand to the level that we want to. And so this would be a great opportunity for us when that lease expires. And so having the initial meeting with the Department of Administration, I think they thought it was just, well, you're just moving from one building to another. And it's like, well, we have so much specialized equipment that it's more than just moving from one building to another. There's a lot that needs to be considered. And so we'll see where it goes. But we have started that conversation, and we're hoping that we're able to move in 2025. So we'll see what happens. I know that was a lot to go through, but we've had a lot going on in weights and measures, and we're trying to, improve our operations, our value to consumers, the public, industry. We're trying to become more efficient in what we do. We're trying to invest in our equipment, because we have some aging equipment out there. So we're really working hard on improving our operations. And I welcome any questions about any of that information we went through. Otherwise, that's all I have to report. Okay. Yes, Brent. Oh, two hands. We'll go with Brent first. And I don't know, Brenda, if you're talking, I think you need to unmute in order for us to hear you there. Okay, maybe we'll. Oh, and he left. Okay, Mark, we'll go with your statement or question first.
Real quick, I couldn't help myself. I did a quick search for the statutory reference for the E15, and I think you're right. 3-3492. There's the 10% reference has been pulled probably a few years ago, but it's now got a weight percent minimum and a EPA waiver max. So I think you're right. I think it may all be able to be done in rulemaking. So I just wanted to correct myself.
Yeah, that's what Michelle thought, because it said, really it referenced the EPA waivers in there, and EPA, allowing up to 15%, then that kind of gives us the green light in the statutes. And so, of course, we're going to make sure as we go forward with it, because we don't want, if there's an opportunity for an E15 market, we don't want it to be held up by an oversight, in our regulations that we didn't pay attention to. And so Michelle's really good at understanding the history of our cleaner burning gasoline and our statutes and rules. And of course, you, Mark, as well, are a great resource because you had a big hand in those regulations as well. But yeah, Michelle, I'm relying on her a lot to kind of make this possible. And we're going to go through here over the next month or so between myself, Michelle Wilson, and our compliance manager for CBG, Vince Wolpert, and kind of create a draft of what we think the E15 rules need to look like. The industry representatives that are interested in establishing the program, they came to us with some proposed changes, and we said, well, that's a great start, but there's a little bit more to it than that, and so we'll see where it goes. All right, so I think.
Hey, I'm back.
All right.
This is Brent. I'm back. I'm sorry.
Okay, did you have a question or a statement about any of the weights and measures
I was
information?
just talking about you were talking about to recognize with the CLOS and having some type of document that thing had been calibrated or repaired or something like that. That might be a good item to definitely discuss in the future for sure.
Okay, yeah, and it really, the rule specifies a decal or label. So to give you an example, what we see a lot in the scale RSA industry is the indicator on the scale or the device itself will have a sticker on the side that says calibrated by so-and-so on this date and time. And a lot of times the companies will use it to remind the device operator, hey, the next calibration's due on this date and time. Sometimes they'll set it 6 months or a year or whatever, which we don't have a requirement in statute on the frequency of calibration, but it's a good reminder for industry, and we encourage that because we want people to focus on maintaining the accuracy of their devices. And so, this would be something like, if I'm thinking of a fuel dispenser, it would be a sticker that's placed up, somewhere maybe on the supports for the pump topper that says, last calibrated by so-and-so on this date and time. And I think that was the intent of the rule originally. It actually originally was a sequentially numbered decal or label that had to be installed on the device, and then the sequentially numbered part was removed in a rulemaking a few years ago, but the rule was maintained, retained, and like I said, we haven't really done anything with it since then. But one of the problems is when we find issues of noncompliance or we have questions about devices and what kind of work was performed, we sometimes don't know who to turn to because the location's not able to provide us with the service records and so on. And so that's where we got into the conversation, like, hey, maybe we could establish this for all devices like the rule is wanting us to. And there are a few states that do that. In fact, New Mexico is a good example of, rather than New Mexico putting in approval sticker on the pumps, I think they require their RSAs to provide a sticker that says, hey, this device was calibrated by this registered service agency on this date in accordance with state of New Mexico standards or something like that. We wouldn't probably
Yeah,
take
we actually have those stickers, and we do when we calibrate in New Mexico. We have those stickers actually.
Yeah, so it would be basically similar to that.
Okay.
Recommending something like that. So yeah, we can definitely next time when we talk about when our next meeting will be, we can add that as an agenda item. Sure. All right. Any other thoughts or questions at this point? Okay. Then that's it for the update. I know it was a lengthy one, but like I said, we've been up to a lot. So, Mr. Chairman, the next item on the agenda is the call to the public. And if you don't have the agenda in front of you, I can read, or another council member can read, if whoever you want, the statement that needs to be read for the call to the public.
I do not have it. I was listening to you, and I got you on my computer, and then when I tried to talk to you, it kicked me off. So
Okay.
I have nothing right now. So if you could read that, I'd appreciate it.
Okay, so call to the public. It says this is the time for the public to comment. Members of the council may not discuss items that are specifically identified on the agenda. Therefore, pursuant to Arizona Revised Statutes 38431.01H, action taken as a result of public comment will be limited to directing staff to study the matter, responding to any criticism, or scheduling the matter for further consideration and decision at a later date, which would be, a future meeting. So does anybody that's joining us have a member of the public have any comment that they would like to make? All right. And then the next item is an executive session, which I don't believe we need to participate in, but I'll leave that up to the chairman.
I don't believe we have, as the chairman, I don't believe we have an executive session at this time.
Okay. And then it's just a conversation about our next meeting, when we think that should occur.
Well, I hope it, as the chairman, I hope it doesn't go 6 months. So in the future. So I would like to have another meeting at some point.
Okay. I will say we've kind of been doing a quarterly basis. And, that might put us into March, which aligns with what we've done in the past, March, June, like September and December type of thing. So we could try and shoot for that if you want.
Does anybody, what was that comment?
Sorry, Brent. This is Mark. I'm for March, and keeping it on a quarterly basis. It makes sense, and that'll give me time to review what was forwarded earlier.
Yes, as a chairman, I would love to have it every quarter, and I think sometime in March, whenever works for everybody, would be a great day, great time just to do this, because we had so much stuff to go over right now. I took so many notes, and then I know it was recorded, and I'll probably have to go listen to that again just to make sure I got all the stuff. And then I'll make an effort to get the camera and the thing set up properly here, I guess. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, we just we always have the option of having an in-person meeting as well. I think last time we had a meeting, it was decided to continue virtual, which I don't have a preference, but if it's easier to have an in-person meeting, we can certainly arrange that. We have the meeting space at our office to do so. So if you want, I can kind of do like I have been in the past and just send out an email with some dates and have people respond back and say, okay, yeah, I think this is the date that I prefer, and we'll schedule accordingly.
Just a quick comment, Kevin, you do a wonderful job with this, and it's not that I don't want to meet in person, but I just think this all around is a great way to do it, and you do a great job. So,
well, thank you. I appreciate that. we've had plenty of practice since the pandemic started, and that's one reason why we have only a 200 square foot office that's waiting for us at the new building, because we do so well at being working from home. And I will say, from a quality, kind of a quality of life perspective, and I think our employees appreciate it. Whenever they can work remotely, and that's statewide, I believe, within state government. So we'll continue as long as they tell us to, and if they tell us all to go back in the office, we're going to have to figure out how to share 200 square feet. So anyway.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. This is Brent. I'm fine to meet online. I have not been prepared and have not, other than some Zoom calls, gotten up to speed with this stuff. So I'll definitely get that set up between now and our next meeting.
Okay. And Mr. Chairman, I do have a hand raised from our one member of the public, I guess, Lori Hoover. I'm happy, I guess, to address any questions if we can, depending on what it is. So I guess,
okay.
Go ahead, Lori.
Hi, thank you. I'm sorry, I'm out of order. I leave. I just realized I was under the impression this meeting was a continuation of that October 13th meeting where you didn't reach a quorum or something like that. And it was, I'm specifically interested in the risk assessment based inspection, the breakdown of that and more information. But did I miss it, or is that been rescheduled and I'm not aware? I thought this was it.
It was, and we went through that agenda item. I noticed that you joined us later on in the meeting, and I don't know if it was a time zone thing, perhaps. Are you in Arizona, or?
Yeah, I had
Okay.
10 a.m. as the meeting. No? What time did you
Yeah,
start?
and we did start at 10 a.m. and we went through that portion of the presentation. I will say that,
Oh, that's the reinspection program you were talking about? I took notes on that.
No, we went through the risk-based
Yes.
inspection approach analysis, and I presented the work that we had been done on that. So, like I said, it looked like you had joined in after we had a good portion of that discussion.
Okay.
And I will say that this meeting recording, it's being recorded right now, will be posted on our website, and so you'll have the opportunity to watch through that as well. And we are going to continue that discussion at our next meeting, it sounds like.
Okay.
Right.
So anyway,
I apologize. I didn't realize that since it just came in after that.
yeah, but
okay, great.
I appreciate your interest in that conversation, and yeah, the recording, I will post it. I think I have to post it within the next 3 days or so, and as soon as I get the link on YouTube, and I put it on our website. So look out for that, and then we'll continue the conversation. Looks like in March when we have our next meeting.
So that's completely separate than the reinspection program based on tags. It's beginning in 2022, correct? They're not. That's not.
Yeah, the tag reinspection is a separate thing. I mean, they're all related to risk. We have identified that there is some non-compliance, particularly with placed in service reports in the tag reinspection, and that's one reason why tag reinspections are going to occur. But yeah, it's not really part of that new risk-based analysis that we've conducted.
Okay, great. Thank you. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Okay, so Mr. Chairman, it's I think that's kind of we're at the end of our agenda here. So.
Okay. We had the executive session. No, we had the phone call from her, and the next item is to close the meeting.
Yes, I believe so.
As a chairman, I'd like to suggest that we close this meeting. Do we have a first? None of me.
Yeah, I think Mark was trying to say something, but he's muted.
Oh, that's okay.
If that was a motion, I'll second that motion to close.
Do we need to do a vote on this or a roll call on this?
I don't believe so in this case.
Okay. All right. Well, I propose that we close this meeting at my time says 11:50.
Okay. All right.
Thank
I will
you.
stop the recording and we're all done.
Thanks, guys.
I appreciate